It's like old times. Could you turn me down? Linda, how are you? I'm good, thank you. Good to see you. I'm having a little trouble because I have the sun in my eyes from up there. Yeah, maybe if I slide a little forward, that'll help. Mia, where in Westchester County? Where? Yeah, well, we were just in Ossining. It was my best friend from college's 130th. It was his 70th, his wife's 70th, 140, and their 40th wedding anniversary, so 180th. So we're going to be back for their 200th. No, I don't. I'm not sure about that, but they were celebrating it in the same month. Yeah. Shabbat Shalom, Marnie. Josh, you can go ahead and doodle a bit. It's very special to be back on the Bima for Shabbat after almost 5 years. And I see many things have not changed. There's a few new faces, but a number of old faces, myself now maybe the oldest, one of the oldest. And the other thing that hasn't changed, of course, is that nobody will sit in the first row except for my wife. And she would have not done it either, but there was, that was only convenient. It's a good thing because, I did the sermon at the Unitarian Church last Sunday, and from time to time I do sermons in churches, and it's the same wherever you go. Nobody will sit close. They're afraid they'll get called on or something. And so you can develop your jokes about that, and they work wherever you go. It's like fantastic. Good Shabbos, everybody. Shabbat Shalom and this. that's the protection from the rabbi. So, what I was going to say thank you for calling that out. I was, at some point soon, I was going to say, as big as a treat it is to be back on this bema after all these years, to be back with Josh, who for many of those years shared the bema with me, is really special. In fact, when I first was hired as rabbi, Josh was the head of the search committee. Remember, Josh? And when they put the ad out for the rabbi, it said, if you had any questions, call Josh. So I called somebody named Josh, and we spoke. And so he was the very first person in Bozeman I ever had any communication with. So it's so special to come full circle after all this time. That was 2008. So 16 years ago. So our warm-up will be the words Yedid Nefesh of Harachamam. It's part of the great love song of the Torah. It's heart's delight, source of mercy. Draw your servants into your arms. I'm just in love with you, Holy One. And I feel your presence on Shabbat. The words are found on page 128 of your Sidurim. Yedid Nefesh of Harachaman. Nefesh of Harachaman, Meshuch Avdecha El Ritzonecha, Yarutz Avdecha Kemo Yishtachaveh El Mul Hadarecha Yaidai 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 There's plenty of seats up front. That's the price you pay when you come late. So So Kabbalat Shabbat, the welcoming of Shabbat, this name of this service begins with, actually in a more traditional way, not with just Yadid Nefesh, but with a whole series of love songs from that same text. And then we bring in, after the love comes the light. And so we light the candles to bring in that incredible light. It's said to be the light that was hidden away. Because if you recall, on the first day, God said, "Let there be light." But we have no luminaries no sun or moon until day 4. And so our rabbis ask, well, how could that be? If we have no luminaries, nothing in the sky, where is this light from? And this was said to be the supernal light. It wasn't light like we think of light and dark, but a light that gets hidden away. And it comes out at special times like on Shabbat. And especially when we could see one another's faces in the light reflected by the candles. So we've got a special guest to come light our Shabbat candles today, all the way from New York. And when you come up to light the candles, would you just give us like a 3-sentence, no more, introduction to who you are? Because maybe not everybody knows. Shabbat Shalom. You going to recite the blessing, or do you want Josh to sing it with you?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
And so Kabbalat Shabbat, in fact, in a more traditional service, the bulk of the service is 7 psalms, one for each day of the week, with the last one being the Lecha Dodi, which welcomes in the Sabbath formally, and everything that follows in a more traditional setting is just sort of brief, mumbled, but that's what Kabbalat Shabbat really is. So we're not going to do all 7 psalms because they'll be a little long, but we'll do a couple just to have a taste. We'll start with page 130. Lechu Naranana, come let us sing joyously to God.
Lechu Naranana L'Adonai Nariya Litzur Yishenu Nikadma Panav B'Toda Bizmirot Narialo. Page 131. Shiru Ladonai,
שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, בזרו מיום ליום ישועתו, ספרו בגויים כבודו, בכל העמים נפלאותיו, גדול אדוני וכולם מאוד, נורא הוא הכל אלוהים, יי די די, יי די 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 די, יי די די די,
So we welcome in the light, we welcome in love, we welcome in the warm-up with the Psalms. We have one group we forgot to welcome in that before we get to the Chadodi, which welcomes in the Sabbath bride, and that's the angels that are said to accompany us on Shabbat. We welcome them in on page 142 with the word Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet. Oh, peace be to you, angels, who join us every Shabbat.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Barchuni l'shalom.
Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedechem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei HaMalachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Welcome in the Sabbath bride with the words Lecha Dodi Ligdak Kala Panei Shabbat Nekabbalah. Page 138.
Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabelah.
Verse 1, Shamor v'Zachor.
Shamor v'Zachor b'dibor echad hishmi'anu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad Shemo tiferet v'litchila lecha dodi Likrat Kala B'nei Shabbat Nekabelah. Likrat שבת לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת קלה הנה שבת נקבלה.
Verse 5 comes next.
לך דודי לקראת קלה ילדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה ילדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך אורי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה ילדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה ילדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה.
Verse 9. Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam b'simcha uv'tzahalam toch emune am segulam boi kala boi kala.
לך דודי לקראת קלה ילדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה ילדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה.
And so Shabbat is now officially upon us. We've welcomed in all the requisite folks and one another. And you know what? Maybe we haven't welcomed in one another just as well as we could. So let's take a moment and find somebody you don't know. Tell them Shabbat Shalom. Do you want to do, will you do Baruch Hu? Will you do Baruch Hu? And so we move into Ma'ariv, the evening worship, that starts on page 146 with the Baruch Hu. Maybe I started something I can't stop here. We rise for the Baruch Hu on page 146.
146, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, 146. Oh, I'm on 246, sorry.
I'll do it. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. And so the Ma'ariv takes us through this little cycle of where we begin with recognizing that we're in the evening, and then it's love, the Shema, our love, and then Micha Mocha, our redemption. So we're on page 148, and let's see. Brian, will you read the English on 148? Blessed are you.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening being.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv ha'ravim. Kent, this next page, this is an hour of change. Middle of the page. I said Kent, but
This is an hour of change. Within it we stand, uncertain on the border of life. Shall we dwell back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we dwell back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of life. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over?
Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. And one more reading on page 150. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael. Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta 154:8 Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinanta levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shiftecha b'beitecha u'v'lechtecha b'derech u'v'shachpecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam leot al yadecha v'yehuyu l'totafahot b'heinenecha u'chatavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'hisharecha Adonai Elohechem Emet. And so we move to the reminder of that moment when we cross the sea. Mi chamocha be'elim Adonai, who is like you, Adonai? The words first spoken by Miriam as our people crossed the sea and wondered how in the world can God perform such a miracle. Of course, it's not like it happened in the Charlton Heston movie. It wasn't that Moses raised his staff and the sea split, but one man, not Moses, took one step in and it split only this far in front of him. And then another step and it split that much further. And it's a lesson in faith, that faith is not lifting your rod and the sea will split. It's one step at a time. One step at a time. Mi chamocha b'elim Adonai. God, you'll be with us with each step. Page 158.
Adonai, mi chamocha netabakodesh, noratihi lo tosefele, noratihi lo tosefele. Malechutecha ra'u manecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze Elianu ve'amru, ze Elianu ve'amru. Adonai imloch
And so I said at the start, it's really special for me, having spent 10 years on this bima most Friday nights, to be invited back by Rabbi Sonia when she's on her vacation to stand in for her, and what an amazing job she's doing. So it's an honor to step in to her shoes for just this one night. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom. We ask God to protect us in the evening, because the evening is a little bit dicey sometimes. It's dark and it's scary. And going back to these 10 years I spent on the bima, one of the joys was, besides having Josh, was having just a couple or three other people in the congregation who stepped up and did amazing things on the bima in terms of music. Not other people, Jim Nellick, who for years, and Linda, who ran the religious school, for example, and so many others. But specifically on the bima, one of the bright spots was Eliana Burnham, who brought her music in so many ways. And I'm so honored and thrilled that she'll join us on the bima tonight for our prayer, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, page 160.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ushmor tzitenu uvoenu l'chaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai ha-porei sukat shalom aleinu. Blessed are you, O God. Place your shelter of peace over us and upon all of Israel and over Jerusalem, Ve'al Yerushalayim, Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, and on everybody who dwells on the earth. And so we move on to the tefillah, the prayer, which on Friday night is traditionally said silently. It begins on page 164. We'll ask God together to open our lips, because we don't even know what we want to say half the time. And then the prayer itself begins on page 166 and goes through page 180. We'll all stand for this if you're able, and then be seated whenever it is that you've said what you need to say, either from the book or words on your heart or whatever it is that you need to pray tonight. So we'll rise together for those who are able. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 180.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ואמרו אמן.
So a little word of Torah. Maybe it's actually more than a little, but I don't get to do it very often, so I'm afraid I went on a little bit. This week's Torah portion is called Chukat, and it takes us to the 39th year of our people's 40-year journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. In this week's portion, Miriam and Aharon, the sister and brother of Moshe, die. And Moshe, now 119 years old, he doesn't have very long to live. In last week's Torah portion, the populist Korach called Moshe an elderly elitist and demanded that he step aside. But Moses did not succumb. Yet, given Moses' age, and he sometimes slurs his words, we all know that, but he's been doing that for years. It's clearly a time of transition in our people's story. The elder generation, which personally experienced the horrors of slavery in Egypt and which left in the Exodus, the men and women who crossed the Sea of Reeds and who witnessed the revelation at Mount Sinai, they're all dying out. And a new generation will take their place as they enter the Promised Land. And so I wonder if we're not at a similar time in our of transition in our people's history, with the passing of the generation which lived through the horrors of the Holocaust and the jubilation and challenges around the creation of the State of Israel. Of the 3.5 million European Jews who survived the Holocaust, 200,000, only 6%, are still alive. And they're mostly in their 90s, and many leave us every day. The next generation, my generation, the sons and daughters of those survivors, will provide a link to those people and those events for just a little bit longer. But I turned 70 this year. The horrors of the Holocaust and the struggles and joys around Israel's founding will soon pass beyond living memory. And I've been thinking about how will the next generation recall these momentous events in the Jewish story. The longer I live, the more I realize how events slide from memory into history, often rewritten for various purposes, sometimes drifting far from actual history. Each new generation re-examines history. Take the Holocaust. In the 1950s, Holocaust victims were commonly viewed as sheep going meekly to the slaughter. This demeaning view was later corrected by the countless acts of active and passive resistance and the incredible heroism of so many of our parents and grandparents. In another way of remembering, about 10 years ago in Haifa, there was a bizarre beauty pageant for Holocaust survivors. 14 women in their 80s and 90s donned black gowns, earrings, and necklaces and paraded down a catwalk for the, quote, Miss Holocaust Survivor crown. I'm not making this up. The winner, Esther Lieber, explained, this is what she said, "I have the privilege to show the world that Hitler wanted to exterminate us and we are still alive and we are enjoying life." Author Avram Berg wrote about this pageant in his book, The Holocaust is Over, We Must Rise from the Ashes, saying, "What you see in Haifa is a struggle over the strategy of memory. Will it be permanently victimizing ourselves and whining, or will it be Holocaust survivors saying, remember us positively?" One of my teachers in grad school referred to the pairing of the Holocaust and the formation of Israel as an example of the death and resurrection story, a motif found in many religions. As Jesus supposedly died and was resurrected, the Jewish people nearly died and were resurrected in Israel. The powerful story of a people that lost 1/3 of its numbers and went on to a barren desert and made it bloom was a compelling narrative. Only problem is that it didn't include the fact that another people occupied that land and would soon be displaced by us. As Avram Berg described it in his book, it's as if we jumped from a burning building but landed on people in the street below. For many Jews, the jubilation that we felt from our resurrection in the state of Israel eventually grew more cautious as we considered the plight of those who remained displaced. And now, because of Hamas's brutal attack on October 7th and Israel's brutal response, the situation has exploded among the next generation of Jews. The ones who did not experience the Holocaust or the founding of the State of Israel, but who will rewrite the history of our people for their generation. They'll choose the lens through which they see that history. And right now, we're seeing different approaches to how that next generation might rewrite our people's story. Some young people, especially the Orthodox, but not only them, see Judaism primarily through the lens of perennial oppression and anti-Semitism, so they see a strong need for a safe haven in Israel. Other young people see Judaism through a different lens. They see the moral of the Jewish experience in the Torah's constant repetition of the command that we not oppress the stranger because we know what it feels like to be strangers, which they've heard again and again at their families' Passover Seders through all the years. For them, condemning the occupation and human rights violations in Israel and Gaza is what it means to be an authentic Jew. And many are involved in groups actively protesting Israel's government and policies like Jewish Voice for Peace or the If Not Now movement. For them, Zionism is a political doctrine and Israel is a political entity, unrelated to, or at least not all that connected to, their core Jewishness. This year's graduation of new rabbis at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Philadelphia reflects this growing divide. Of the 11 graduating new rabbis, more than half identify as anti-Zionists and have been participating in anti-Israel protests and actions. When some students formed the RRC Students Supporting Israel chapter, the other side, only 8 students joined out of the 60 students enrolled at RRC, leading 3 of the 8 to withdraw from the school. This debate about the role of Israel in Jewish history is not new, though it has been made urgent again by the circumstances. This debate can be traced back to the Zionists of the late 19th century. The core idea of Zionism at that time was that Jews are a distinct people and are entitled to national self-determination like all other peoples, be them Greeks or Italians or Poles. Over time, for some, Zionism came to be understood to include not only the right of self-determination, but also that right specifically in what is now the land of Israel. And some, like ultra-Orthodox and right-wing Israelis, have gone further, insisting that Zionism means that Jews have the exclusive right to the land. And all of these are different understandings of Zionism. But until World War II, Zionism was very unpopular among Jews. Orthodox Jews rejected Zionism on religious grounds because they couldn't have a state until the Messiah came in their theology. Most secular Jews identified with the ideals of the Enlightenment and saw Zionism as a reactionary ideology. Some, perhaps prophetic Jews, worried that a Jewish state would lead to a potentially dangerous Jewish nationalism. Mainstream Jewish opposition to Zionism was finally overcome beginning in the 1930s when conditions for Jews deteriorated in Europe and the sheer scale of the Holocaust was felt. Today, there are new dimensions to the debate about Zionism, informed by decades of an occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, the Hamas attack of October 7th, and the killing of some 35,000 Palestinians. But however one sees these events, the relationship between the political state of Israel and one's Judaism has always been an intra-Jewish debate. And it ought to be an intra-Jewish debate wrestled with by this next generation. And perhaps that's the point I want to make most clearly tonight, because what really bothers me is that outsiders have intervened and are trying to define Judaism for us for their own political benefit, casting us as pawns in their ideological battles. Some politicians have sought to seize the political advantage by equating opposition to Israel's government with anti-Semitism. Even that was the subject of a bill in Congress. And then portraying themselves as the true protectors of Israel and Jews who are under assault, usually they say from the progressive left. For example, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, equated opposition to Israel's policies with anti-Semitism and decries the virus of anti-Semitism that is being spread by pro-Palestinian protesters is spreading across the country. In March, when Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the nation's highest-ranking Jewish elected official, called for new elections to replace Prime Minister Netanyahu, congressional Republicans accused him of being anti-Israel. Mr. Trump went further, saying that, quote, any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. And when several Jewish groups criticized his comments, the Trump campaign responded that the Democratic Party, quote, has turned into a full-blown anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-terrorist cabal. Apparently, I'm an anti-Semite, and I didn't know it. Who knew? Ironically, the pro-Palestinian protesters that these folks oppose under the banner of eliminating anti-Semitism includes many Jews, Jewish groups, and even the majority of those graduating as rabbis from one of our rabbinic colleges, all of whom are now labeled anti-Semitic by non-Jews. Even worse, these same folks who label many Jews as anti-Semites seem unconcerned with a more classical understanding of anti-Semitism, which they regularly espouse by depicting Jews as manipulative and avaricious. Across the centuries, This conspiracy theory has worn many faces, from Judas to Shylock to the Rothschilds. Under Stalin, accusations of, quote, rootless cosmopolitanism echoed Hitler's charges about a, quote, poison injected by the international and cosmopolitan Jews to destroy the Aryan race. In today's language, these manipulative and avaricious Jews are described with thinly veiled language such as globalists and globalist elites. The favored personification of the globalist enemy is George Soros, a 93-year-old Hungarian-American Jewish financier and Holocaust survivor, who has spent billions in support of democratic institutions. Mr. Soros is also a favorite target of Hungary's right-wing nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a hero of the American right who Trump calls terrific. Though these politicians usually cast the enemies as globalists rather than Jews, one need not look very far to find the coded message. Just for example, and I could give you 100 examples like this, in a recent podcast, Harry Vox, a self-described investigative journalist, railed against, quote, every scumbag who uses the word globalist because he's afraid to use the truth Jewish banking cartel, which he said is the real definition of globalist. Alex Jones, host of the InfoWars program, called Soros the head of the Jewish mafia and said that the Jewish mafia, quote, demonizes anyone that promotes freedom. His guest on that particular episode where he said that was the rapper Kanye West, known as Ye, thank you, who professed admiration for Hitler and was hosted by Mr. Trump at dinner at Mar-a-Lago along with Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist leader and outspoken Holocaust denier. The New York Times recently reviewed 5 years of emails, press releases, tweets, and newsletters of Mr. Trump and members of Congress, finding that last year there were 790 emails from Mr. Trump and 79 congressmen to supporters invoking Mr. Soros or globalists in ways that evoked the historical anti-Semitic tropes, up from just a handful of messages in 2013. For example, Mr. Trump referred to Soros as, quote, shadowy, evil, and the man behind the curtain who's destroying our country and wanting the American people to be humiliated or destroyed and replaced or dead. Mr. Soros in these emails is blamed for leading people to, quote, forget about God and family values, for controlling the media, for allowing violent criminals and rapists to get off scot-free. Mr. Trump, of course, also helped popularize the unfounded conspiracy theory that Mr. Soros was financing a caravan of Central American migrants, a view shared by the gunman who killed 11 congregants at a Pittsburgh synagogue. Some claim that Soros supports Hamas and blame him for the pro-Palestinian protests. During the 2016 campaign, Mr. Trump tweeted a photo of Hillary Clinton against the backdrop of $100 bills and a Star of David. His closing campaign ad featured Mr. Soros, along with Janet Yellen, then chairwoman of the Federal Reserve, and Lloyd Blankfein, then the chief executive of Goldman Sachs, both of whom are Jewish, as examples of global special interests enriching themselves on the backs of working Americans. Locally, just last week, the Gallatin County Republican Central Committee posted to Facebook a meme of Mr. Soros as a puppeteer dangling Obama, Biden, and Harris at the end of his puppet strings, a meme similar to ones we saw in the 1930s. They'd done this once before and were called out on it, but apparently doubled down. I could go on so far. I actually cut half of this because there's so much. But the current climate has highlighted these politicians' split-screen messaging. After October 7th, for example, Representative Andy Biggs of Arizona posted on X, quote, anti-Semitism and calls for the destruction of Israel are detrimental to the safety of our Jewish communities. But just a couple of months before, he had promoted anti-Semitic tropes, including that, quote, the criminal cabal, primarily Jewish-controlled central banks, are funding evil in America. This professed love for Israel provides perfect cover for this anti-Semitism of the right. For example, I was scheduled to give the invocation in the Montana legislature, but it was taken from me and given to a Messianic Christian at the last moment. I protested, calling out what I saw to be anti-Semitism. Hundreds of Montanans wrote letters to the Speaker of the House demanding an explanation. He eventually responded, never explaining why I was canceled, but saying he could not possibly be anti-Semitic because he loves Israel. Most frightening is a plan to infuse into a second Trump term Christian nationalism, the idea that America was formed as a Christian country and it must be returned to a Christian country governed by Christian principles, according to Russell Vought, who is expected to be Trump's chief of staff if he wins. In this past week's interview of Steve Bannon in the New York Times by David Brooks, Bannon explained that a Christian nationalist America would love Israel and would offer American Jews, quote, the ability to thrive and prosper, conditional upon one thing, and that is a hard weld with Christian nationalism. A recent statement just a few weeks ago, signed by hundreds of conservative activists, explained that in their view of a Christian country, quote, Jews would be protected from religious coercion in their homes and in their private lives, implying that in your public and outwardly facing life as an American, you will not be protected from religious coercion. Author Bradley Onishi, who was a well-known Christian nationalist activist before he left the movement, said that anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are, quote, built into the movement from the beginning, especially including conspiracies about Jewish financier George Soros. And he says, quote, there is this thoroughgoing fetishization of Israel and yet a disdain for Jewish people. Friends, we've seen this play before. Now, though this sort of anti-Semitism is central to America's right wing, I don't mean to minimize the anti-Semitism that has arisen from some on the political left, though it all depends, once again, on how one defines anti-Semitism. In 2023, the Anti-Defamation League reported sharp increases in reports of anti-Semitic incidents, including more than 8,800 instances of anti-Jewish violence, harassment, and vandalism. The analysis is based on the recently broadened criteria, which includes as anti-Semitism some anti-Zionist chants and slogans at rallies. Using that standard where anti-Zionism is equated with anti-Semitism, there's a lot of anti-Semitism to go around, some legitimately concerning and severe, some questionable. Columbia University seems to be the epicenter of all of this. There, a group of 540 Jewish students wrote an emotional public letter that equates opposition to Israel on that campus with anti-Semitism. And the students argued that, quote, Judaism cannot be separated from Israel. They also charged that Jews who stand with pro-Palestinian protesters, quote, tokenize themselves and try to delegitimize the experience of Zionist Jews on campus. They've noted that a handful of left-wing extremists have likened Zionists to Nazis and hold all Jews responsible for Israel's actions. They also point to what they consider anti-Semitic chants and statements, the most controversial one being "From the river to the sea," which some say calls for Palestinian control of all lands in Israel and the elimination of Jews there, but others say it only means that Palestinians should be free of occupation and discrimination in all of Israel and Palestine. Ironically, several of Israel's right-wing ministers in office now espouse the exact same idea in reverse, insisting that from the river to the sea should be exclusively Jewish. This week, Columbia suspended 3 deans because shortly after October 7th, they said that they, quote, stood in full solidarity with Palestinian resistance. They also mocked and derided the claim of the Jewish students who saw the pro-Palestinian protests as anti-Semitism. These professors were clearly incredibly insensitive to the concerns of some Jewish students, which, at the least, they were guilty of, and anti-Semitic at worst, but you can see how blurry the line can get. So all of this leads me to wonder whether anti-Semitism can be defined at all. Sure, we all know that anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews because we are Jews, but we can't define Jew hatred without first defining Jew, and therein lies the problem. For those that consider Israel a central pillar of being Jewish, opposition to Zionism or even opposing Israel's government's policies can be anti-Semitism. Does that mean that the many Israelis who oppose Netanyahu's government policy are anti-Semitic? In fact, 70% of Israelis? Or the young new Reconstructionist rabbis who've committed their working lives to the Jewish people, are they anti-Semitic? It also begs the question that if Israel is not a central pillar of Judaism, what is? Is it in our genes, which is what Hitler and Orthodox Judaism argue? And if so, is it from your mother or your parent or grandparent? Or is it related to a belief in God, a belief in Torah, a belief in Tikkun Olam? Is it about going to shul, being part of a Jewish community, having a bar mitzvah, playing mahjong, eating bagels, kugel, or maybe even pickled herring? Yum. Great pickled herring at the co-op. Maybe it's about celebrating holidays, but if so, which ones? Each of these are factors, but none are determinative. So if we can't define Jew, how can we define what must be hated to be an anti-Semite? If opposing Israel's government is anti-Semitic, is denying the existence of God or Torah, or hating the taste of bagels also anti-Semitic? Our inability to define Jew, and by extension, anti-Semitism, has unfortunately opened the door, created a vacuum, so that outsiders are trying to define these terms for us, not for our benefit, but to advance their own political agendas. So I've come a long way from this week's Torah portion about the shifting of generations. Just as that new generation, which had not experienced the slavery of Egypt or the journey to the Promised Land, stood at the precipice and were about to rewrite our history, so the Jewish story of our time remains to be written by this next divided generation. Which part of the story will they remember and rewrite? The slavery in Egypt, the Holocaust, our perennial oppression, and the need for a place of refuge? And if they do, what must they do with the mistaken language of the early Zionists who called Israel a land without a people for a people without a land? Or will they remember the 36 times that Torah tells us that because we know what it's like to be oppressed, we must never oppress others, which they heard at all those Passover seders? Or maybe they'll just double down on bagels and lox. I don't know where this will end, but I do know that we as Jews must control our own story. The Exodus is a universal story with universal themes that's inspired people all around the world through the ages, but it is first and foremost a Jewish story. The Shoah was a crime against Jews before it was a crime against humanity. We can't allow politicians to rewrite our story for their ideological purposes, and nor can we allow well-meaning attempts by some to use our Jewish tragedy to express a general universal message about the dangers of hate, intolerance, and racial prejudice. That's not bad, on the condition that it doesn't write the Jewish people out of the story. It happened to us, just as surely as the Exodus happened to us. So as I look out over the monumental task of the next generation, that will be you guys in the back, I'm informed by the story of the rabbi who comes to a new community and inquires whether the congregation's custom is to stand or sit during the Shema. And he goes to the board, and one of the president of the board says, "We've always stood during the Shema." And the vice president says, "No, Rabbi, he's totally wrong. We sit during the Shema." And they begin to have an argument, and the rabbi says, "Wait a minute. Is there an elder here that's been around since the founding that we can inquire about this?" And they said, "Well, yes, there's Mr. Goldstein, and he's at a nursing home. But he's very old. He's almost 100. And they say, "Well, can he speak and answer questions?" "Yeah, sure he can." So the three of them head off to the nursing home to see Mr. Goldstein. And before the rabbi could even enter the room, the president and the vice president run in, and one is saying, Mr. Goldstein, will you tell him that our custom is to stand during the Shema?" And the other one is saying, Mr. Goldstein, will you tell him that our custom is to sit during the Shema?" And they're arguing, and then finally there's a moment of silence, and the rabbi says, "Mr. Goldstein, which is it?" And Mr. Goldstein looks to both of them and says, "That is the custom of the congregation." Shabbat Shalom.
Childhood was for fantasies, for nursery rhymes and toys. The world was much too busy to understand small girls and boys. As I grew up, I came to learn that life was not a game, that heroes were just people that we called another name, and the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Now I'm grown, the years have passed, I've come to understand there are choices to be made, and my life's at my command. I cannot have a future till I embrace my past. I promise to pursue the challenge. Time is going fast, and the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Today's the day I take my stand. The future's mine to hold. Commitments that I make today are dreams from days of old. I have to make the way for generations come and go. I'll have to teach them what I've learned, so they will come to know that the old shall dream dreams, and the youth shall see visions, and our hope shall rise up to the sky. We must live for today, we must build for tomorrow. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Give us time, give us strength, give us life. Give us life.
I asked Josh to learn the song to sing after this talk, and he did, as he's always done over the years, learn new music. And he remarked that what a loss Debbie Friedman was, who wrote this song. And she was, she will be remembered forever for so many contributions. She died way too young. Oh, the good musicians always seem to die young. And what a blessing she was to our people to give us so much great music. We think about those who need our healing blessings with the words of Misha Berach, which are found throughout the prayer book. I happen to open it to page 371, but you can find it wherever you choose. What? Is there another place? Where? 511. Yeah, it comes up in the service a bunch of times, so we'll, 511. Misha Berach Avotenu, as we think of those who need our healing prayers.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
As I go around, I invite you to call out the names of those who we want to lift for healing. or just hold them in your heart, whatever you're more comfortable with. Mort Meyerson.
Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
May all of those we hold on our hearts, the names we've called out and those that we hold, be lifted for healing. Amen. We come to the Mourner's Kaddish on page 598, which we will follow by Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Maybe somebody could figure out what page that's on. And then we will head into the other room for an Oneg Shabbat that Cody has so graciously prepared for us. And we will say Kiddush in there. And Motzi maybe? Yeah, and Kiddush in there. So first, I don't know, it's been some congregations, people in mourning rise for the Kaddish, and others, everybody rises for the Kaddish. It's another. They could have argued about that instead. But what I've always done is we stay seated, and then halfway through, those people who are in mourning rise. But if you feel more comfortable rising for the whole thing, that's okay. Who are there people in particular for who we're saying Kaddish? Oh. Yeah, Beth and I just found out a good friend of ours from our prior life died this week, Michelle Goldberg. Oh, yeah, she's bourgeois, that's right. The words of Kaddish, and if you'd like to stand now or halfway through, it's your druthers. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divrach urte, v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayeh dechol beit Yisrael, Bagalav izman karu v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba Mavarach le'olam olamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalel v'yithalal shemei dekush ha'brichu le'elam min kol brachata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechamata damiram b'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya V'chayim aleinu v'yokol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom b'imrumav, hu ya'asei shalom, aleinu v'yokol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and all Israel and all the world, to which we say, Amen. Od yavo shalom aleinu. I don't think so. What page? 657.
Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom